It was a Tuesday morning when the envelope slid under my door. Just a soft scrape against the hardwood, barely louder than the hum of my coffee maker. I didn't think much of it at first. At 67, you get used to the mail, doctor's bills, pharmacy reminders, the occasional flyer for gutter cleaning. My knees ached as I shuffled over to pick it up, the arthritis flaring worse than usual that week. I figured it was another notice about my blood pressure meds. The pharmacy had messed up my refill last month, and I'd been chasing them ever since. But this wasn't from the pharmacy. It was a plain white envelope. My name typed in cold black letters, Eleanor Brooks. Occupant, no return address, no handwriting, just that word, occupant, staring up at me like I was a stranger in my own home. I tore it open, my hands already trembling, though I didn't know why. Inside was a single sheet of paper, crisp and official, like something from a lawyer's desk. A rent notice, $300, due by the 5th of the month, for utilities, maintenance, and living privileges. And at the bottom, in sharp blue ink, a signature, Sophie Larson. My daughter, my only child, the same daughter I'd given this house to 7 years ago. Fully paid, signed over with a promise that I'd have a place here when I couldn't live alone anymore. She didn't even write Mom, just her name, like I was a tenant who'd overstayed my welcome. I stood there in the hallway, the paper shaking in my hands. For a full minute, I swear I forgot how to breathe. It was like the floor dropped out from under me. That sick lurch in your stomach when you trip but don't quite fall. I read the notice again, then a third time, hoping it was a mistake. A prank, maybe, or some automated mix-up. But the words didn't change. Guest privileges suspended pending payment. Guest, that's what she called me. Not her mother, not the woman who'd raised her, not the one who'd handed her the keys to this house with tears in my eyes. A guest. 7 years ago, I gave Sophie this house as a wedding gift. It was a promise, not just a deed. I told her, this is yours and Nathan's. But when I'm too old to manage on my own, I come here. That's the deal. No lawyers, no contracts, just a mother and daughter looking each other in the eye. She hugged me so tight that day, her voice breaking as she whispered, I'll take care of you forever. Mom, I promise. I believed her. God help me. I believed her. But that was before Nathan's big promotion, before Sophie's new friends, before the endless renovations and the shiny SUV in the driveway. Before I moved into the guest room 2 years ago, when my arthritis got so bad I couldn't climb the stairs to my old apartment anymore. And now, here I was, holding a rent bill from my own daughter, like I was some boarder who'd forgotten to pay up. I waited for Sophie in the kitchen, the notice laid out on the counter like a dead thing. My coffee had gone cold, but I didn't care. I kept thinking, maybe it's a misunderstanding, maybe Nathan sent it without telling her, maybe she'll laugh and tear it up. But when I heard her key in the lock, my heart sank. She walked in, phone in one hand, sunglasses perched on her head, and the second she saw me holding the paper, her face didn't soften, it hardened, annoyed, like I was wasting her time. Sophie, I said, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. What is this? She sighed, tossing her keys on the counter. Look, Mom, we need to be practical. Bills are piling up, Nathan's working overtime, and I'm juggling clients. You live here, you use the electricity, the water, the Wi-Fi. It's only fair you chip in. I stared at her, this woman who used to curl up in my lap and beg for bedtime stories. Fair? I said, I gave you this house. You promised I could stay here when I needed to. That was the deal. She shrugged, like it was nothing. That was years ago. Mom, things change. We didn't think you'd be here this long. She opened the fridge, grabbed a bottle of sparkling water, and leaned against the counter, not even looking at me. It's just rent. Everyone pays rent. I felt something crack inside me. Not loud, but deep. And if I don't pay? What then? You want me to sleep in my car? She laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound that cut right through me. Don't be dramatic. Just think about it, okay? Then she walked out, her heels clicking on the floor, leaving me alone with that damn piece of paper. I didn't cry, not then. I waited until she was upstairs, until I was sure she couldn't hear me. Then I grabbed my purse, stuffed a few clothes in a bag, and left. No slamming doors, no shouting, just silence. I drove to the parking lot of a CVS and sat there as the sun dipped below the horizon. The rent notice crumpled in my lap. How had it come to this? How had the girl I raised, the one I'd poured my heart into, become someone who saw me as a line item on a budget? Around 8 o'clock, I popped the trunk to grab a jacket. My hands brushed against an old cardboard box I hadn't touched in years, bank statements, medical records, things I'd kept after Henry passed. Tucked inside was a smaller envelope, sealed, with his handwriting scrawled across it, house papers. Keep safe. My breath caught. I tore it open, my fingers clumsy in the dim light. Inside was the original deed transfer, the one I'd signed over to Sophie. But there was something else, a folded letter from Henry, dated a year before he died. His words were simple, like always, but they hit me like a wave. Ellie, this house is your heart. Don't let anyone take it from you. If things go wrong, check the safe deposit box. I left something for you. I sat there, tears blurring the ink, and for the first time that day, I felt a spark of something besides pain. Hope, maybe, or anger. Whatever it was enough to make me fold the letter carefully, tuck it back into the envelope, and think, maybe this isn't over. Maybe the girl I raised forgot who built this home. But I haven't. That night in the CVS parking lot, with Henry's letter pressed against my chest, I couldn't stop thinking about the day I gave Sophie the house. It was 7 years ago, but it felt like yesterday. The memory was so clear it hurt, like looking at an old photograph and realizing you can't step back into it. I closed my eyes, the hum of the car engine fading, and let myself go back. Back to when things were different. Back to when Sophie was still my little girl. She was 31 then, just married to Nathan, her face glowing like she'd caught every star in the sky. They were struggling, though. Nathan was a software engineer, smart as a whip, but his startup had tanked. And Sophie's event planning business was barely breaking even. They'd been renting a cramped apartment, saving every penny for a down payment. But the houses they toured were either too expensive or falling apart. I'd see them come back from open houses, shoulders slumped, trying to hide their disappointment. It broke my heart. The house, our house, was different. Henry and I bought it 30 years ago with every dime we had, plus the money from his watch repair shop and my teacher's salary. It wasn't fancy, just a sturdy 2-story with a wraparound porch and a backyard big enough for a garden. We raised Sophie there. She learned to ride her bike on that driveway, scraped her knees on those steps, hung her prom dress in the upstairs closet. After Henry passed, I held onto it, even when the upkeep stretched me thin. It was more than a house. It was us, our life, our love. I'd been thinking about selling it, maybe moving to a smaller place. The arthritis was starting to creep in, and the stairs were getting harder. But when I saw Sophie and Nathan struggling, I couldn't stand it. One morning, I called her. My hands were shaking, not from nerves, but from the weight of what I was about to do. Come over, I said. I want to talk about something. When she walked in, I had the deed on the kitchen table, next to a plate of her favorite oatmeal cookies. She looked confused, then curious. I took a deep breath and said, "This house is yours and Nathan's, a wedding gift, so you can start your life without worrying." Her eyes went wide, then filled with tears. "Mom, no," she said, "you can't. This is your home, your safety net." I smiled, even though my heart was racing. "I'm sure, honey, your dad would have wanted this. But there's one thing, when I'm too old to live alone, I come here, no questions, no arguments. That's the deal." She nodded, her voice catching. "Of course, Mom, you'll always have a place with us. Always." She threw her arms around me. And for a moment, she was 6 years old again, clinging to me after a bad dream. I believed her. I believed every word. The day they moved in, I showed up early with a casserole and a bottle of wine. Sophie squealed when she saw the hardwood floors, freshly polished. Nathan grinned, running his hand over the banister like he couldn't believe it was theirs. "This feels like we're finally getting somewhere," Sophie said, kissing him. That phrase stuck with me, finally getting somewhere. Like life was a race, and they'd just pulled ahead. I didn't think much of it then. I was just happy to see them happy. For the first couple of years, things were good, really good. We had Sunday dinners, the 3 of us crowded around the table, passing mashed potatoes and laughing over old stories. Sophie would call to check on me, ask if I needed help with errands. When my arthritis flared up, she'd bring me a heating pad and tease me about being stubborn. Nathan would mow the lawn when he visited, even though I told him not to bother. I still had my own apartment then, a little place across town, but I kept a bag at their house, just in case. It felt like family, like we were all in it together. But then things started to shift. Slowly at first, so small I barely noticed. Nathan got a big promotion at his tech firm, and suddenly they had money. Real money. Sophie's business took off, too. She was planning swanky corporate events, rubbing elbows with people who drove cars I couldn't pronounce. The house started changing. They ripped out the old carpet, put in sleek tile. The cozy porch swing was replaced with a modern sectional. Sophie said it was about elevating the space, but it felt like they were erasing me. Bit by bit, she started calling me Eleanor instead of Mom, especially around her new friends. I'd hear her laugh and say, "Oh, that's Eleanor's old quilt," like I was a tenant who'd left junk behind. Nathan stopped coming to Sunday dinners, always tied up with work. The guest room, my room, the one I'd stay in when I visited, got a fresh coat of paint. And Sophie asked if I minded them turning it into a flex space. I didn't mind, at least. I told myself I didn't. I wanted them to make the house their own. That's what I'd given it to them for, right? But deep down, it stung. I'd lie awake at night, wondering if I'd made a mistake. Not because of the house, I didn't care about the money. It was the promise, the one Sophie had made with tears in her eyes. I kept quiet, though. That's what you do as a parent, isn't it? You swallow the hurt. You tell yourself it's temporary. You wait for things to go back to normal. 2 years ago, normal disappeared for good. I fell in my apartment, tripped on a loose rug, and ended up in urgent care with a sprained ankle and a bruised ego. Sophie picked me up, her face all worry. "You're staying with us," she said, "just until you're back on your feet." I didn't argue. My lease was ending, and the stairs at my place were a nightmare. So I moved into their guest room, my old sewing room. Now stripped of my things and dressed up like a hotel. At first, it was okay. Sophie helped me settle in, hung a few of my pictures on the wall. Nathan bought me a new pillow, said it'd help with my neck pain. But then the distance crept in, cold and quiet. Sophie stopped asking how I was. Nathan barely spoke to me, always glued to his laptop. They'd eat dinner without inviting me, leaving plates in the sink like I was invisible. Once, I found the pantry locked, with a little keypad. Like I was some kid who'd sneak snacks. I didn't say a word. I just kept my head down, telling myself it was their house now, their rules, until that rent notice came. Until Sophie looked me in the eye and called me a burden. That's when I knew, the girl I'd raised, the one who'd promised to take care of me, was gone, and I wasn't sure who was standing in her place. I didn't sleep that night in the CVS parking lot. How could I? Henry's letter was burning a hole in my thoughts. Those words about the safe deposit box looping in my head like a song I couldn't shake. By the time the sun peeked over the horizon, I was running on coffee and something fiercer, anger. Maybe, or just the stubborn refusal to let my daughter erase me. I knew I couldn't go back to the house yet. Not until I had something to fight with. So I started the car and drove straight to the bank. The safe deposit box was at First National, a little brick building where Henry and I had kept our important papers for decades. The clerk, a young woman with a kind smile, led me to the vault. My hands shook as I slid the key into the lock. The metal box heavier than I expected. Inside, it was like opening a time capsule. Old savings bonds, Henry's dog tags from his Navy days, a photo of us at Sophie's high school graduation. And there, tucked in a manila envelope, was what I'd been hoping for, a single sheet of paper. Yellowed at the edges, in Henry's careful handwriting, it was a draft agreement. Not signed, but clear as day. This house is gifted to Sophie Larson, with the condition that Eleanor Brooks retains lifetime residency, non-revocable unless she chooses to leave. I sat there, the vault air cold against my skin, and read it over and over. Henry had thought of this, even before he got sick. He'd known to protect me. I pressed the paper to my chest, tears stinging my eyes, and whispered, "Thank you, Henry." You're still looking out for me. But that wasn't all. There was a sticky note attached. In my own handwriting from years ago. So faded I almost missed it. Keep this. Just in case. Just in case. Those words hit me like a punch. I'd written them, but I'd forgotten. Forgotten how careful we'd been. How much this house meant. I folded the paper carefully. Slid it back into the envelope. And left the bank with something I hadn't felt in days: purpose. I didn't go home right away. I couldn't face Sophie. Not yet. Instead, I drove to a diner. Ordered a slice of pie I didn't eat. And stared at the envelope. The rent notice was still in my purse. Crumpled now, but its words were seared into my mind. Occupant, $300. Sophie Larson. I kept asking myself how it had come to this. How my little girl, the one who'd once drawn me pictures of our house with crayon hearts, had decided I was a bill to be paid. I knew I had to confront her. But I needed to be smart. So I went back to the house the next morning. When I knew Nathan would be at work. Sophie was home, barefoot in leggings, her phone in one hand and a notebook in the other. She didn't hear me come in at first. She was in the living room, rearranging pillows, snapping photos, muttering something about natural light and modern charm. It looked like she was staging the place for a magazine shoot. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. She jumped, then flashed a smile. Too bright, too practiced. "Oh, Eleanor, hi. Just taking some pics for a listing." "Nothing big." "A listing?" My heart sank. "You're renting out the house?" "Just a room," she said, waving a hand like it was no big deal. "We need the extra cash. You know how it is." But it wasn't just a room. I glanced past her, and there it was, brochures from a short-term rental site scattered on the coffee table. A checklist taped to the wall, new linens, Wi-Fi upgrade, patio refresh, price tags dangled from throw pillows. This wasn't a side hustle. This was a plan to turn my home into a business. I didn't ask permission. I walked down the hall to my room, my heart pounding, and pushed the door open. Half my things were gone. My books, my knitted throw, the little clock Henry had fixed for our anniversary, they weren't there. The room looked sterile, like a hotel, with new bedding and a generic painting on the wall. I turned back to Sophie, my throat tight. "What is this?" She didn't flinch. "We figured you'd be moving out soon," she said, cool as ice. "Nathan and I talked. You mentioned wanting your own place, right?" "I never said that," I snapped, my voice shaking now. "This is my home, Sophie. You promised I could stay here." She crossed her arms, her smile gone. "Look, it's not personal. We just need the income. Things are tight." Tight? With their new car, their designer clothes, their endless renovations? I wanted to scream, but instead, I pulled out my phone, my fingers trembling as I hit record. She noticed, her eyes narrowing, but she didn't stop me. "If you pay the rent, you can stay," she said, her tone clipped. "But otherwise, we need the space. It's just business." "Business?" I said, keeping my voice calm, though it felt like a storm was raging inside me. "You told me I'd live here for the rest of my life." That was the agreement. She rolled her eyes, like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "There's no agreement, Eleanor. It was a gift. Gifts don't come with strings." Then she paused, her lips curling into a smirk. "We didn't think you'd make a fuss. Honestly, we thought you'd just go." That was it. That was the moment I saw her, really saw her. Not my daughter, not the girl I'd raised, but someone who'd decided I was disposable. And then she said something that made my blood run cold. "Nathan doesn't even know about the rent thing. It wasn't his idea." I stopped recording, my hand frozen. "Whose idea was it, then?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She didn't answer, just turned away, picking up her notebook like I wasn't even there. I walked out, my legs unsteady, and drove to the library parking lot. I connected to their free Wi-Fi, emailed the recording to myself, then sat there, staring at my phone. That smirk, that pause, it wasn't just Sophie. Someone else was pulling the strings. And I needed to know who. The next morning, I walked into Clara Mitchell's office, clutching my purse like it was the only thing keeping me upright. Clara was 50, sharp-eyed, with a warm voice that made you trust her. A friend from church had recommended her. She'd helped her niece out of a bad property dispute. I didn't know what to expect. But I had everything: the rent notice, Henry's letter, the draft agreement, the recording queued up on my phone. I laid it all out on her desk, my hands still shaking. Clara skimmed the papers, her face unreadable, then leaned back. So, you gave your daughter the house as a gift, but with a verbal condition that you could live there for life? I nodded. That's right. And now she's charging you rent to push you out? She asked, tapping her pen on the desk. Yes, I said, my voice cracking. I told her everything, the cold way Sophie spoke, the rental brochures, the way my room had been stripped bare. I played her the recording, watching her face as Sophie's voice filled the room. Gifts don't come with strings. Clara didn't flinch, just listened, her eyes narrowing slightly. When it ended, she said, "Did you tell her you were recording?" "No," I admitted. "It was in my home. I thought, I just needed proof." She nodded. "It's likely admissible here, but we'll check. This isn't a slam dunk case, Eleanor, but it's strong. If we can show the gift was conditional, even morally, and that Sophie's actions amount to elder abuse, we have a shot at securing your right to stay." Elder abuse. The words hit me like a brick. I'd never thought of it that way. But that's what it was: control, manipulation, silence. I asked her what it would cost. She looked me in the eye. "It's not cheap. If you win, you could get a permanent residency clause. If you lose, you might be out for good. But honestly, I think a jury will hate what your daughter's done." I left her office feeling like I was carrying a compass for the first time in weeks. Not a map, not a guarantee, but something to point me forward. I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet, not when Henry's words were still echoing in my head. "This house is your heart. Don't let anyone take it." The weeks leading up to the court hearing felt like walking through molasses. Every day was heavy, slow, like time itself was testing me. I barely slept. I'd lie in my temporary apartment, a cramped studio I'd rented with what little savings I had left, staring at the ceiling, replaying Sophie's voice in my head. Gifts don't come with strings. That smirk, that pause when I asked whose idea the rent notice was. It wasn't just her. I knew it, and I was about to find out who else had their hands on my heart. Clara, my lawyer, was a rock through it all. She called me every few days, her voice steady, going over the plan. We had Henry's draft agreement, the recording of Sophie, the deed papers, every scrap of proof we could find. "It's a strong case, Eleanor," she'd say, "but they'll fight dirty. Expect it." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me through the phone. I didn't have anything to hide. But the thought of Sophie and Nathan dragging my life through a courtroom made my stomach twist. A week before the hearing, Sophie left a voicemail. I almost didn't listen. Part of me wanted to delete it, to shut her out completely. But I pressed play, and her voice filled the room. Calm, almost rehearsed. "Mom, this is getting out of hand. Let's talk. Just us. Nathan and I want to meet at a mediation center. We can work this out without lawyers. Please." For a split second, I saw her as a little girl again, the one who'd cry if I didn't tuck her in. But then I remembered the rent notice, the stripped-down guest room, and I forwarded the message to Clara. "Don't go alone," Clara said when she called back. "If you want to hear them out, I'll be there, but don't sign anything, just listen. They're fishing for something to use against you." So I agreed. The mediation was held in a bland office building, the kind that smells like stale coffee and printer ink. I got there early, sat in the parking lot, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Clara showed up right on time, her briefcase in hand, and walked me in like a shield. Sophie and Nathan were already there, sitting across a long table, dressed like they were going to a board meeting. Sophie had a leather planner in front of her. Nathan a pen he kept tapping on the table. Impatient. The mediator, a woman with a tight smile, started the session, asking each side to share their perspective. Clara nodded at Sophie to go first. Sophie leaned forward, her voice soft, almost pleading. "Look, I think we've all let emotions get the better of us. We never meant to hurt Eleanor. We just wanted to be fair. The house is expensive to maintain, and we thought she'd understand that contributing a little was reasonable." She glanced at Nathan, then back at me. "We're willing to offer a buyout, $40,000. If she agrees to move out and drop this claim. It's generous, considering the house was a gift. $40,000 for a home built with Henry's sweat. my savings, our love, for the promise Sophie made with tears in her eyes. I felt my chest tighten. But before I could speak, Clara cut in, her voice calm but sharp. And if Eleanor refuses? Nathan blinked, caught off guard. Then we let the courts decide, he said, his tone clipped. But it'll get messy. Nobody wins. Sophie chimed in, her voice a little too smooth. The rental bookings are already set for the next 6 months. We're just trying to keep things stable. Clara raised an eyebrow. Rental bookings? Is the property listed for rent right now? Sophie hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. No, Nathan said quickly. Too quickly. Clara slid a folder across the table, opening it to a printed page, a listing from a short-term rental site. Complete with photos of my house. Timestamped from 3 days ago. You're lying, she said, her voice like steel. This undermines the entire mediation process. The mediator's smile faltered, her pen hovering over her notepad. Sophie's face flushed, and Nathan started flipping through his planner, like he could find an excuse buried in the pages. This is ridiculous, Sophie said, her voice rising. She's twisting everything, using Dad's death to guilt us. Clara squeezed my hand under the table, a silent signal to stay quiet. Let them unravel, she whispered, and they did. The mediator ended the session early, saying, I recommend resolving this in court. The trust here is broken. As we stood to leave, Sophie followed me into the hallway. Mom, come on, she said, her voice softer now, almost desperate. We can fix this. We're family. I turned to her, and for the first time, I didn't see my daughter. I saw a stranger wearing her face. No, Sophie, I said, my voice steady. You stopped being family when you sent me that bill. I walked out, Clara at my side, the sunlight hitting my face like a promise. The court hearing came faster than I expected. The morning of, I woke before dawn, sitting on the edge of my bed. The silence so loud it hurt. I chose a simple dress, one Henry always said made me look strong, and packed every document in a neat folder, tabbed and labeled. Clara met me at the courthouse, her presence like an anchor. The courtroom was small, cold, with fluorescent lights that made everyone look tired. Sophie and Nathan sat across from us. Nathan in a suit, Sophie avoiding my eyes, her hands fidgeting with her bracelet. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for, and the one I never saw coming. Clara laid out our case, her voice clear, weaving together Henry's letter, the draft agreement, the recording, and my testimony about the promise. She painted a picture of a mother betrayed, a promise broken, a home turned into profit. Sophie's lawyer, a man with a nasal voice, tried to argue that the gift was unconditional, that I was a guest, that Sophie and Nathan had no legal duty to me. But Clara was ready. She'd subpoenaed Sophie to testify. Sophie took the stand, her composure slipping as Clara questioned her. Yes, she admitted, her voice tight. Eleanor gave us the house. Yes, she mentioned living there someday. And then, under pressure, the truth spilled out. The rent notice was a way to encourage her to leave. We didn't think she'd fight back. The courtroom went quiet. I could hear my own breathing, sharp and uneven. Clara didn't stop. And whose idea was the rent notice? Ms. Larson? Sophie froze, her eyes darting to the gallery. Clara followed her gaze. And that's when it happened, the twist that turned my world upside down. Was it Vivian Larson? Clara asked, her voice cutting through the silence. Vivian, Nathan's mother, a woman I'd known for years. Always polite but distant, a real estate investor with a knack for flipping properties. Sophie's face went pale. She suggested it. She stammered. She said it was standard. That Eleanor had no legal claim. That we could maximize the house's potential. Clara didn't miss a beat. She presented a new piece of evidence, a series of text messages between Sophie and Vivian, pulled from Sophie's phone records. Vivian had coached her, step by step. The rent notice, the rental listing, even an app to monitor my conversations through Sophie's phone. Vivian had seen my home as a payday, and Sophie as her pawn. The judge, a woman in her 60s with eyes like steel, leaned forward. Ms. Larson, it appears your actions, influenced or not, constitute a breach of trust and an attempt to exploit a vulnerable family member. She ruled that I'd have a permanent life estate in the house, no rent, no interference. Sophie and Nathan could keep ownership, but they couldn't sell or profit from it while I lived there. They were ordered to pay court fees and issue a written apology. Though I knew I'd never see it, I didn't cry, I didn't cheer, I just sat there, letting the words wash over me, heavy and final. Sophie and Nathan left without a word, their faces blank. Clara touched my arm. "You did it, Eleanor. It's over." But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like breaking free from a cage I hadn't even known I was in. The day after the court ruling, I drove back to the house. It was early, the kind of morning where the air feels clean, like the world's holding its breath. I stood in the driveway, my suitcase at my feet, and just looked. The porch was still there, though the swing was gone. The flower beds Henry had tended were overgrown, replaced with sleek gravel. It didn't feel like home. Not yet, but it was mine again. In a way I hadn't realized I'd lost. I walked inside, the silence so thick it pressed against my ears. Sophie and Nathan were gone. No cars in the driveway. No shoes by the door. The living room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner, like they'd tried to erase themselves before leaving. I set my suitcase down in the guest room, my room, and sat on the bed. The new mattress creaking under me. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I had to tiptoe, like I was borrowing someone else's space. I was home. That night, I found something that nearly broke me all over again. In the back of the closet, tucked behind a box of Sophie's old event planners, was a small safe, not Henry's, but new, with a digital keypad. I don't know why I tried the code, Sophie's birthday. The same one I'd used for every lock in our family, but it worked. Inside was a tiny USB drive, labeled guest room. My hands went cold. I grabbed my old laptop, the one I hadn't touched since moving in, and plugged it in. The screen lit up with footage. My room, me, folding clothes, taking my arthritis pills, reading by the lamp, a blinking red light in the corner, hidden above the doorframe, a camera. The dates matched the weeks before the rent notice arrived. They'd been watching me, Sophie, Nathan, or maybe Vivian, every private moment, every sigh, recorded like I was a problem to be managed. I sat there, staring at the screen, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break. I wasn't just unwanted, I was violated. I didn't call the police. Not then. Part of me wanted to drag them all back to court, make them face what they'd done. But after everything, the lawyers, the lies, the betrayal, I was tired. Not defeated, just done. I pulled the camera down, its wires dangling like a cut nerve, and boxed it up with the USB drive. I locked it in a drawer, labeled it evidence, and told myself I'd decide what to do later. For now, I needed to heal. Healing didn't happen overnight. It started small. In the quiet moments, I began reclaiming the house. Not out of spite, but because I needed it to feel like mine again. I donated the cold, modern furniture Sophie had chosen, the glass tables, the stiff chairs, and brought in things that felt like me. A quilt from my mother, soft and worn. A wooden rocking chair I found at a thrift store. I repainted the kitchen a warm yellow, the color Henry always said reminded him of summer. My friend Linda from church came over to help, her laughter filling the rooms as we sanded cabinets and hung curtains. I reopened the back porch, the one Henry had boarded up years ago. I turned it into a reading nook, with a small table and wind chimes that sang in the breeze. Every morning, I'd sit there with my coffee, watching the sun rise, and feel something shift inside me. Not peace, not yet, but something close, like I was remembering who I was before the hurt, before the silence, before I let anyone decide what I was worth. Sophie didn't call, no apology, no explanation, not even the court-ordered letter. I heard through Linda that she and Nathan had split up, that Vivian had pulled her money out of their rental business. Sophie moved to another city, started over. I didn't feel triumph. I felt a slow, aching sadness, the kind that comes when you realize the child you loved never really saw you, just what you could give her. But I didn't dwell on it. I couldn't. I had to keep moving. One day, I went to a support group at the community center. It was for women like me, older, hurt by family, trying to find their footing. At first, I just listened. Their stories so much like mine it hurt. Then I started talking, sharing pieces of what I'd been through. Before long, I opened my living room to them. We called it the porch circle. Meeting twice a week to talk, laugh, sometimes cry. Those women became my family. Not by blood, but by choice. They reminded me I wasn't alone. A few months later, a reporter from the local paper reached out. She'd heard about the court case through public records and wanted to write about elder rights. About what happens when family turns on family. I hesitated, but then I thought of the women in my group, of others out there. Silent and hurting, so I said yes. We sat in my living room, the quilt draped over the couch, and I told her everything. When she asked how I wanted to be quoted, I didn't have to think. I gave my daughter a home. I said, I evicted a stranger. There's a difference. The article went further than I expected. People wrote to me, letters, emails, even a few donations for the porch circle. Women I'd never met shared their stories, their pain, their hope, and just like that, the house stopped being the place where I was betrayed. It became the place where I rebuilt myself. Not because of the court, not because of the law, but because I remembered who I was. Eleanor Brooks, a teacher, a wife, a mother, not to Sophie anymore, but to myself. Looking back, I learned something that stays with me every day. Family isn't just blood or promises. It's the people who see you, who hold you up when you're falling, who don't ask what you're worth before they love you. I lost a daughter, but I gained a home, not just these walls, but a legacy. Henry's voice, whispering through the wind chimes, the laughter of my new friends, filling the rooms, the strength I didn't know I had, waiting all this time for me to claim it. I live here now, not because I have to, but because I choose to. This house isn't just a gift I gave away. It's a promise I kept, to myself, to Henry, to the woman I'm still learning to be. And that's enough.